the eternal struggle to understand others. There is an unspoken truth that haunts human existence. No matter how close we become to another person, no matter how many words are exchanged, how many years are lived side by side, how many moments of intimacy are shared, we can never truly know what another human being is thinking. A friend smiles, and we assume they are happy. A lover reassures us, and we assume they are faithful. A politician promises reform, and we assume they mean what they say. But history and psychology tell us otherwise. For thousands of years, across cultures, across empires, across families and friendships, human beings have struggled with one insurmountable problem: the opacity of the mind. We see only the surface. We hear words, we observe gestures, but beneath it all there is a labyrinth of motives, fears, resentments, and ambitions that we cannot directly perceive. This is the eternal struggle to understand others. Masks in the dawn of humanity. In early tribal societies, survival depended on it. To misread another's intentions was to invite death. If you mistook a rival's forced smile for kindness, you might wake to find your camp burned. If you trusted the wrong ally, you might lead your people into an ambush. The ability to read intentions, to sense hostility, to see beyond words, this was not just a skill. It was a form of life insurance. Archaeologists find evidence of rituals and symbols in caves tens of thousands of years old. What were these rituals but early attempts to decode and disguise inner states? A painted mask in a tribal ceremony was not just decoration. It was an early recognition that the face can deceive. That what is shown on the outside is not necessarily what exists within. Nietzsche, centuries later, would echo this ancient intuition, that humans are masked animals, masters of concealment, forever hiding themselves not only from others, but even from themselves. The fragile illusion of transparency. Fast forward thousands of years. Monarchs ruled from golden thrones. Courtiers flattered them with honeyed words. In the royal courts of Europe and Asia, every gesture was a performance. A bow could be sincere loyalty, or a mask concealing betrayal. A smile could promise friendship, or plot assassination. The game was one of reading others instantly, because hesitation meant doom. Those who could not read faces quickly found themselves poisoned, exiled, or executed. Even today, we live in a world where the illusion of transparency, the belief that words and appearances directly reveal the mind, is comforting but dangerous. We want to believe we know others. We want to trust our family, our leaders, our neighbors. But Nietzsche warned against this naivety. To him, every word carried subtext, every action concealed motive, and every relationship contained an undercurrent of struggle. To read others is not to take their words at face value, but to understand the hidden currents beneath. Why we fail at reading people. Psychologists today confirm what Nietzsche suspected over a century ago: human beings are not naturally good at detecting lies. Study after study reveals that even trained professionals, police officers, judges, interrogators, succeed only slightly above chance when trying to detect deception. Why? Because we want to believe masks. We want the comfort of assuming sincerity. We ignore the subtle cues, the contradiction between words and body language, the momentary hesitation before agreement, the nervous twitch disguised as a smile. Nietzsche believed that this blindness was not accidental but functional. Society depends on masks. Civilization runs smoothly not because everyone is honest, but because everyone agrees to play along with illusions. Without masks, there would be no diplomacy, no commerce, no friendship, perhaps not even love. But here lies the paradox: to live peacefully, we must ignore masks. To protect ourselves, we must see through them. Nietzsche's warning. Friedrich Nietzsche did not set out to write a manual on how to read people. He was not a self-help guru, nor a detective. He was a philosopher who tore apart the illusions of morality, culture, and psychology. But hidden inside his writings, fragments scattered across beyond good and evil, human, all too human, on the genealogy of morality, is a blueprint for seeing the human mind with startling clarity. He called attention to the psychological truths no one wanted to face, that resentment shapes virtue, that weakness hides behind morality, that people rarely know their own motives, and that what we call truth is often just the most effective mask. Nietzsche's philosophy is unsettling because it strips away comfort. It leaves us exposed to a world where people's actions are rarely what they seem, where every compliment might conceal envy, where every act of kindness might disguise self-interest. And yet, it also empowers us. To see clearly is to live with fewer illusions. To read people instantly is not to become cynical, but to become realistic. A glimpse at history's masks. History is a stage littered with masks. Think of Julius Caesar, who claimed he was protecting the Republic even as he dismantled it. Think of Queen Elizabeth I, who mastered the art of projecting virgin purity while navigating ruthless political games. Think of modern leaders, who campaign on promises of change or unity, while quietly securing their own power. In every era, the same lesson repeats: to read the mask is to survive the theater of power. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He saw life as a battlefield of appearances, where truth is less important than perception, and where those who cannot see through masks are destined to be controlled by them. The modern mask. But this is not just history. Today, the mask is stronger than ever. On social media, billions of people craft digital masks, curated versions of themselves, happier, more successful, more virtuous than they are in reality. On resumes, in job interviews, in dating profiles, the mask is polished to perfection. Politicians tweet authenticity while strategists script every word. Celebrities post vulnerability while publicists calculate the effect. And ordinary people do it too. You do it. I do it. The mask is not a lie. It is survival. Nietzsche would argue that our very sense of self is just the most convincing mask we have learned to wear. So how do we read through it? How do we pierce the veil? The path toward clarity. The first step is to accept Nietzsche's premise that words are never enough. Reading anyone instantly begins not with listening to what they say, but with questioning why they are saying it, what power dynamic it serves, what hidden motive it conceals. This is not paranoia. It is clarity. Nietzsche once wrote that every philosophy is a confession. The same can be said of every action, every smile, every excuse. People reveal themselves not by what they declare, but by the contradictions between their declarations and their actions. In the next sections, we will uncover Nietzsche's 18 psychological truths, principles that expose the undercurrents of human behavior. Each truth is like a lantern in the fog, revealing what is otherwise hidden: resentment, envy, ambition, fear, the will to dominate, the hunger to belong. Imagine sitting across from someone, a colleague, a friend, a lover, a stranger on the train. Outwardly, they smile. They speak casually. They present themselves as calm, confident, composed. But beneath that mask, something else is stirring: a quiet resentment, a desperate insecurity, a thirst for recognition, a fear of being forgotten. Most people never look beyond the mask. Nietzsche did. And if you are willing, you can too. To read anyone instantly is not to gain a supernatural ability. It is to accept that masks are everywhere, and to train yourself to notice the fractures where the mask slips. In this way, Nietzsche's philosophy becomes less an abstract theory, and more a practical art, the art of seeing human beings as they truly are. This is the eternal struggle to understand others. And it begins here. There is a moment in every human interaction where we sense it, the faint slip of a mask. A smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. A laugh that comes a second too late. A voice that trembles beneath practiced confidence. In those moments, we catch a glimpse of something deeper, something raw, something unpolished. And then, just as quickly, the mask is back in place. Nietzsche believed these masks were not accidents, not superficial ornaments, but the very essence of human social existence. Every profound spirit needs a mask, he wrote. The mask is not a lie, it is survival. The birth of the persona. The word persona comes from Latin, meaning mask, and referred originally to the wooden faces worn by actors in Roman theatre. Behind the mask was the actor, but to the audience, there was only the character. Nietzsche saw the same process in everyday life. People rarely present themselves as they truly are. Instead, they present a performance. The worker plays the role of responsibility, the lover plays the role of devotion, the friend plays the role of loyalty. Beneath the role may lie indifference, resentment, even betrayal, but the mask must stay in place, or the social play collapses. This is not hypocrisy. It is necessity. Imagine a world where everyone spoke every thought, where every insecurity, every envy, every impulse was laid bare. No friendship would survive. No marriage would last. No political order would function. The mask is civilization's glue. The mask as weapon, yet the mask is more than protection. It is also a weapon. A leader wears a mask of certainty to inspire obedience, even if privately drowning in doubt. A priest wears a mask of virtue to command reverence, even if privately consumed by temptation. A corporation wears a mask of social responsibility while privately pursuing profit at any cost. Nietzsche saw this clearly. The mask is a tool of power. It allows the weak to appear strong, the strong to appear merciful, the insecure to appear confident. It is a stage prop in the theater of survival, a tool in the endless game of the will to power. To read people instantly, then, is to learn to distinguish between the mask and the face. But Nietzsche would warn, sometimes, the mask becomes the face. Sometimes, we become what we pretend to be. Jung and the Inheritance of the Mask. Decades later, Carl Jung expanded on this very idea. He called it the persona, the social face we wear to navigate society. Behind it, he argued, lies the shadow, everything we suppress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. Nietzsche anticipated this tension. He knew that what we present outwardly is only a fraction of what we are. The smile conceals resentment. The virtue conceals desire. The moral sermon conceals envy. When we interact with others, we are not speaking to their true selves, we are speaking to their carefully rehearsed personas. And when we speak ourselves, we too are hiding, editing, suppressing. The irony is that we resent masks in others, while clinging desperately to our own. History's masters of masks. History is filled with figures who mastered the art of masking. Machiavelli, the Renaissance advisor to princes, advised rulers to wear the mask of virtue even while practicing vice. Appear merciful, he wrote, but be ruthless when necessary. Appear trustworthy, but betray when it secures power. The mask is not deception, it is strategy. In France, King Louis XIV, the Sun King, turned his court into a theatre of masks. Nobles competed not with swords, but with smiles, etiquette, and flattery. Appear loyal, appear graceful, appear indispensable, or be cast aside. In modern times, politicians build entire careers on masks. They campaign as humble servants of the people, but behind closed doors, alliances, deals, and compromises tell another story. The mask of authenticity may be the most polished mask of all. The double-edged mask. But Nietzsche did not see masks as wholly negative. They were not just tools of manipulation. They were also expressions of creativity. To wear a mask is to experiment with identity, to shape oneself as an artist shapes marble. Behind one mask may be weakness, behind another, possibility. We do not only hide behind masks, we grow through them. A shy individual may put on the mask of confidence until, one day, it becomes real. An insecure artist may put on the mask of genius until, one day, it is no longer an act. A society may put on the mask of morality until, one day, morality takes root. Nietzsche saw this as part of the eternal play of life, with appearances shaping reality, masks becoming flesh. In this way, the mask is not only deception but creation. The dangers of forgetting the mask, and yet, danger lurks here. For if the mask becomes too convincing, we forget that it is a mask. We begin to mistake performance for essence, illusion for truth. The leader who pretends to be savior begins to believe it. The moralist who preaches purity convinces themselves of their own perfection. The lover who acts devoted forgets the resentment festering beneath. Nietzsche feared this self-deception most of all. He despised those who hid behind masks so well they believed in their own performance. He admired those rare individuals who could wear a mask consciously, as art, as strategy, without ever confusing it for reality. To him, this was strength, the ability to create appearances while never becoming enslaved to them. Reading the cracks. So, how do we read others in light of this? Nietzsche offers a chilling suggestion: do not look for the mask itself. Everyone wears one. Instead, look for the cracks. The contradiction between words and tone. The fleeting expression that passes too quickly. The action that undermines the stated value. The silence when truth would be loud. These cracks reveal more than the mask ever hides. They are glimpses into the shadow, into the resentment, into the will to power beneath the performance. And here is the unsettling part: others are watching you, too. Your cracks. Your silences. Your slips. Just as you read them, they are reading you. The theater of masks is mutual. We are all actors and audience at once. Modern masks consider today's digital age. Social media has become the grand stage of masks. The influencer posting vulnerability, carefully edited, strategically timed. The executive tweeting compassion while lobbying against workers' rights. The ordinary user projecting happiness while privately battling despair. These are not exceptions. They are the rule. Online, everyone wears the mask. But the cracks remain: the inconsistency between words and actions, the desperation in overposting, the bitterness in subtle jabs. To read others today is to become an archaeologist of masks, digging not into polished surfaces, but into the fractures where truth leaks out. Nietzsche challenges us not only to see masks in others but to confront our own. What masks do you wear? The mask of strength to hide insecurity? The mask of kindness to hide resentment? The mask of knowledge to hide fear of ignorance? To live authentically, Nietzsche suggests, is not to discard masks entirely. That is impossible. Rather, it is to wear them knowingly. To choose them consciously. To never let them harden into a prison. This is the psychology of masks. As you walk through life, into offices, into relationships, into conversations with strangers, remember, every face is a mask. Every word is a performance. Every gesture is a costume rehearsed on the stage of survival. But if you learn to see the cracks, the slips, the contradictions, you begin to read people instantly. Not perfectly, not infallibly, but with a clarity Nietzsche believed most never achieve. And when you recognize your own mask in the mirror, you begin to live with honesty, not by discarding illusion, but by mastering it. Because in Nietzsche's philosophy, the mask is not something we escape. It is something we learn to wield. Words lie. Gestures deceive. Masks conceal. But beneath the surface, something deeper drives every human action. Nietzsche called it the will to power. It is not simply a hunger for domination, as popular caricatures suggest. It is more primal, more intimate. It is the force that compels the artist to create, the scientist to discover, the lover to seduce, the rival to outwit, the politician to rule. It is the underlying current of all human behavior. To Nietzsche, if you want to read someone instantly, you must look beyond words, beyond appearances, beyond even their masks, and ask, what power are they seeking here? The hidden engine. Most people explain their actions with noble justifications. I help because I care. I lead because I want to serve. I study because I love truth. But Nietzsche was skeptical of such claims. He believed these justifications were often disguises. The real driver was the will to power, a need to assert oneself, to shape reality, to impose order, to elevate one's position. When a leader claims to act out of duty, look deeper. Are they securing influence? When a partner insists they act out of love, look closer. Are they seeking control, validation, reassurance? When a philosopher claims to search for truth, look again. Are they seeking intellectual supremacy, the power of being right? Nietzsche saw through the alibis. Beneath every action was a contest of forces. From ancient thrones to office desks, history offers endless case studies. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, claiming to defend the Republic. In truth, he sought power that only empire could give. Napoleon crowned himself emperor in the name of liberty, but his eyes betrayed hunger for immortal glory. Religious leaders throughout history spoke of saving souls, but many were driven by the intoxicating control of guiding masses. And it does not end with kings and generals. Even in the modern office, the same dynamics play out. A colleague interrupts you not merely to add a point, but to reassert dominance in the room. A boss praises your work, but frames it to reinforce hierarchy. A co-worker offers to help, but in truth positions themselves to claim credit. The scale may be smaller, but the will to power is the same. Psychology confirms Nietzsche's modern psychology, in many ways, has caught up with Nietzsche. Alfred Adler, once a student of Freud, broke from psychoanalysis and built his theory around that striving for superiority, a close cousin to Nietzsche's will to power. For Adler, every neurotic symptom, every ambition, every relationship, could be traced to the drive to overcome inferiority and assert strength. Social psychologists speak of dominance behaviors, subtle cues like posture, interruption, tone, that signal hierarchy. Evolutionary psychologists argue that human cooperation itself is not free of power, but rather another form of negotiation for status and survival. Nietzsche anticipated it all. Reading people through power. If you adopt Nietzsche's lens, reading people becomes less about decoding words and more about spotting struggles for position. Observe interruptions, who interrupts whom, and how often. This reveals hierarchy more than titles do. Track attention, who commands the gaze in a room? Who is ignored? Attention is a currency of power. Watch contradictions. When someone claims not to care, but becomes defensive, their will to influence is exposed. Notice envy. Resentment is power denied. It leaks out in tone, in micro-expressions, in sarcasm disguised as humor. People rarely declare their power plays outright. But the will to power leaks through action, silence, and contradiction. The politeness of power. Nietzsche also understood that power is rarely raw. It dresses itself in politeness. A ruler says, "I serve the people." A business says, "We care about our customers." A lover says, "I just want what's best for you." But look closer, Nietzsche urges. The mask of care, duty, morality, or love often hides the will to dominate, to possess, to shape. This is not always sinister. Sometimes it is necessary. But it is always there. Politeness, then, is not the absence of power, it is its most effective disguise. Power in everyday life. To see this, you don't need to look at kings or philosophers. Look at children. A child cries, seemingly helpless. But in that cry is a strategy. It commands attention, it forces adults to respond. The child learns instinctively that vulnerability itself can be a weapon of power. In friendships, the same patterns emerge. One friend becomes the listener, appearing humble, but secretly wielding power through the accumulation of secrets. Another friend becomes the advice giver, cloaking superiority in the mask of guidance. Even in love, Nietzsche would argue, the will to power lurks. A lover's tenderness can be genuine, but also a subtle way of binding, of securing devotion, of shaping the other's life around one's own. To live, to relate, to survive, is always, in some sense, to struggle for power. The shadow of resentment. Where power is denied, resentment grows. Nietzsche called this ressentiment, the poisonous byproduct of powerlessness. It is not simply anger. It is a slow-burning fire of envy, disguised as morality. The powerless man says, "The rich are greedy." The overlooked woman says, "The confident are arrogant." The failed artist says, "Fame corrupts." Nietzsche saw such statements not as truths, but as weapons. Morality, in his view, was often resentment codified into law. To read people, then, is to ask, is this conviction rooted in genuine belief, or in denied power? The modern battlefield of power today, the will to power plays out in subtler arenas. On social media, people fight not with swords, but with likes, followers, and attention. A post framed as sharing knowledge may be a bid for authority. A vulnerable confession may be a strategy for sympathy and control. In workplaces, the same applies. Titles may matter less than who can frame the narrative, who can influence perception, who can command loyalty. The true struggle is often invisible, fought with words, impressions, and narratives. Nietzsche would remind us, these are not exceptions. This is the human condition. Nietzsche's brutal clarity, and here lies Nietzsche's brutal clarity. If you want to read anyone instantly, abandon the comfortable belief that people act from noble motives alone. Instead, ask, what position are they trying to strengthen? What insecurity are they trying to cover? What influence are they trying to extend? Strip away the alibi, and the will to power reveals itself. Picture a meeting, a family dinner, or even a casual conversation with a stranger. On the surface, it appears ordinary, words exchanged, smiles traded, rituals performed. But Nietzsche would insist, beneath it is a battlefield. Not of weapons, but of wills. Each word, each silence, each gesture is a move in the endless game of power. To read others instantly is not to guess their thoughts. It is to perceive their struggles for power, the hunger to dominate, the desperation to belong, the resentment of being overlooked, the joy of being obeyed. Masks may hide it. Politeness may soften it. But the will to power is always there. And if you learn to see it, you begin to read human beings not as they pretend to be, but as they truly are, creatures of power, endlessly striving, endlessly performing, endlessly revealing themselves in the very effort to conceal. Truth 1. Contradictions reveal more than consistency. People work tirelessly to present a consistent image, moral, confident, kind. But Nietzsche noticed that it is not consistency that reveals character. It is contradiction. When someone preaches humility yet hungers for recognition, the mask slips. When a leader calls for peace yet builds an army, the truth appears. Watch contradictions, not rehearsed consistency. That is where reality hides. Truth 2. Resentment is a stronger force than love. Nietzsche argued that resentment, ressentiment, drives far more action than affection. Love is fleeting, but resentment festers. The wronged employee undermines their boss for years. The scorned lover plants subtle barbs long after the relationship ends. The powerless condemn the powerful, not out of moral conviction, but envy disguised as virtue. Read resentment, and you read the truth of motivation. Truth 3. Flattery is domination in disguise. Compliments are rarely innocent. They are currency, tools of influence. When someone flatters you, ask, what do they want? Nietzsche warned that flattery often disguises a subtle domination, to make you lower your guard, to make you feel indebted, to position themselves as indispensable. Praise can be as manipulative as criticism. Truth 4. Admiration is tinged with secret hatred. People admire strength, but Nietzsche knew they secretly await its downfall. Crowds cheer heroes but whisper about their failures. Colleagues applaud success but quietly hope for collapse. This duality, outward admiration, inward envy, is everywhere. The louder the applause, the deeper the hidden resentment often runs. To read people, notice the difference between what they say and what they hope. Truth 5. Every virtue hides a selfish origin. Kindness often masks a desire for control. Generosity may conceal guilt or the wish for recognition. Even morality, Nietzsche argued, grew out of weakness, the powerless inventing values to restrain the strong. Every virtue hides a selfish origin. When reading others, ask not what virtue do they claim, but what selfish root nourishes it. Truth 6. People believe what serves them. Truth, Nietzsche wrote, is not discovered, it is chosen for its utility. People cling to beliefs not because they are true, but because they are useful. A belief that preserves dignity, status, or hope will outlast facts. To read someone, do not ask what they believe. Ask instead, what does believing this belief give them? Truth 7. Weakness masks itself as morality. Nietzsche saw morality itself as a mask. The powerless cannot defeat the strong directly, so they brand strength as evil and weakness as good. This inversion of values creates entire moral systems. Thus, the meek claim superiority through virtue, while resenting the powerful. When someone moralizes, Nietzsche would advise, look for the weakness they are sanctifying. Truth 8. People are addicted to appearances. Most would rather appear good than be good. Appearances carry social reward, substance often goes unnoticed. Politicians know this, celebrities thrive on it, and ordinary people curate it online. Nietzsche insisted, appearances are not accidents. They are chosen strategies. To read anyone instantly, analyze not what they are, but what image they are desperate to maintain. Truth 9. Truth is rarely desired. Comfort is people claim to seek truth, but Nietzsche argued they truly seek comfort. The scientist may claim objectivity, but they are guided by their hunger for recognition. The believer may claim devotion, but they are clinging to consolation. Strip away the noble language, and you find comfort-seeking. Reading people means asking, does this person want truth, or simply a shield from it? Truth 10. Words conceal more than they reveal. Language, Nietzsche said, is a prison of clichés. People repeat phrases not to reveal themselves, but to conceal. I'm fine. It's nothing. I only want to help. These words soothe, deflect, distract. Real motives often emerge in slips, the unsaid, the accidental, the contradiction between tone and word. To read people, focus less on words, more on what leaks around them. Truth 11. Self-deception is the rule, not the exception. Nietzsche insisted that people lie most often not to others, but to themselves. They cannot bear their motives, so they invent noble alibis. The tyrant claims duty. The jealous friend claims concern. The insecure lover claims devotion. When you encounter certainty in others, ask, what painful truth have they buried beneath self-deception? Truth 12. Envy is universal but rarely admitted. Envy, Nietzsche knew, is the most denied of emotions. People confess anger, sadness, even hatred, but never envy. Yet envy silently structures relationships. Friends grow cold when one succeeds. Communities turn hostile when one member rises above. The louder someone denies envy, the more likely it festers beneath. Spot envy, and you uncover hidden rivalries and motives. Truth 13. People desire not equality, but advantage. Equality is praised in words, but in practice, Nietzsche saw that people want to win. The cry for fairness is often the cry of the losing side. Once power shifts, yesterday's egalitarians become tomorrow's dominators. Watch not what people say about justice, but how they behave when they gain an advantage. That is their true creed. Truth 14. The strong are resented for existing. Nietzsche argued that strength itself is enough to provoke hatred. The intelligent, the beautiful, the successful, they need not act unjustly to invite scorn. Their mere presence ignites resentment in others. This explains why the gifted are often isolated. Others cannot forgive them for simply being what they are. Truth 15. Every confession is a strategy. When people confess weakness, it is rarely pure honesty. Confession seeks power, to disarm criticism, to gain sympathy, to reset an image. A politician admits mistakes only after calculating the effect. A friend confesses faults as a way to secure forgiveness. Nietzsche believed confession is another mask. To read people, ask, what power does this confession seek? Truth 16. People worship strength but follow weakness. Crowds cheer the strong but are governed by weakness. Leaders who display humility, vulnerability, or victimhood often gain more loyalty than those who display raw dominance. Nietzsche saw this paradox everywhere. Power cloaked in weakness is more persuasive than power displayed nakedly. Reading others requires spotting when weakness is being wielded as a weapon. Truth 17. Hidden motives outweigh stated ones. What people claim rarely matches what they want. A neighbor offers help out of kindness, but quietly builds leverage. A friend advises for your good, but secretly seeks control. Nietzsche urged us to read beneath the surface. People rarely know, and almost never admit, their true motives. Trust actions over explanations. Truth 18. To read others, study yourself first. Nietzsche ended where most fear to begin, self-confrontation. The easiest person to deceive is oneself. To understand others, you must first recognize the same drives within you: envy, resentment, ambition, hunger for recognition. By studying your own masks, your own contradictions, you gain the clarity to see them in others. Without self-knowledge, all reading of others is projection. Nietzsche's 18 truths are not comfortable. They strip away illusions of innocence, sincerity, and purity. But they offer a brutal gift: clarity. To read anyone instantly is not to master a trick of psychology. It is to see through the fragile performances of humanity, to notice contradictions, to detect resentment, to hear what words hide, to confront envy and self-deception. And in doing so, you realize everyone is an open book if you know what to read. There is a silence that comes with seeing too much. The moment you begin to pierce masks, to recognize hidden resentments, to detect envy behind admiration and self-interest behind kindness, the world does not become brighter. It becomes lonelier. Nietzsche warned of this. He knew that the gift of seeing too clearly is not a gift that brings comfort. It is a gift that isolates. The curse of clarity. Imagine walking through a crowded street. Laughter spills from a cafe. Friends chat with easy smiles. Lovers hold hands as if nothing exists beyond their intimacy. On the surface, it seems beautiful. But if you see too clearly, you notice something else. You notice the tension in the friend's smile, hiding insecurity. You notice the flicker of control in the lover's gesture, the subtle competition in the group's laughter. You see that the joy is not pure, the loyalty not untainted, the morality not free of ulterior motive. Most people live comfortably with these illusions. They believe the mask, and in believing it, they enjoy its warmth. But the one who sees too clearly lives in the cold. Nietzsche's loneliness. Nietzsche himself lived this curse. He dissected morality until it revealed resentment. He dissected kindness until it revealed power. He dissected truth until it revealed utility. And in doing so, he isolated himself. His works were dismissed, his ideas called dangerous, his life filled with solitude. He saw so much of human psychology with brutal clarity that others could not bear to follow. He once wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." To see too much is to soar beyond the comfort of illusion, and to appear alien, even threatening, to those who remain grounded. The social penalty. People do not reward those who see too clearly. They fear them. Think of whistleblowers who expose corruption, not celebrated, but silenced. Think of prophets in history who saw hypocrisy in priests and kings, not honored, but executed. Think of philosophers who stripped away illusions, often exiled, ridiculed, or ignored until long after death. Society is built on shared illusions. When you see through them, you threaten the fabric of belonging. And society responds harshly. This is why Nietzsche believed philosophers must often live at the margins. Too much clarity makes one dangerous to the collective. The psychological toll. Even without persecution, clarity itself exacts a toll. The person who sees through flattery cannot enjoy a compliment without suspicion. The person who sees through morality cannot take comfort in rules without irony. The person who sees through love's power struggles cannot rest in intimacy without doubt. Life becomes a hall of mirrors, every gesture dissected, every word questioned. What once brought warmth now feels staged. What once seemed sincere now looks calculated. This is not cynicism. Cynicism still believes in the game, just bitterly. Nietzsche's clarity is more radical. It strips away the game entirely, leaving behind raw struggle, naked will, endless masks. And in that rawness, many find despair. Ancient echoes. This curse of clarity is not unique to Nietzsche. Ancient stories echo it. The Greek prophet Cassandra was given the gift of perfect foresight, but cursed so that no one would believe her. She saw truth, but her truth brought her no power, only torment. In another myth, Tiresias was granted wisdom but blinded, as if the gods knew that to see too much of human nature was a kind of blindness to ordinary life. Nietzsche's philosophy carries the same echo. To see through appearances may grant wisdom, but it robs you of innocence. Why illusions are necessary? Perhaps illusions are not simply lies. Perhaps they are oxygen. Without illusions, relationships would collapse under the weight of brutal honesty. Without illusions, societies would disintegrate into raw power struggles. Without illusions, individuals would drown in despair at the futility of motives. Illusions are fragile, yes, but they are also functional. Nietzsche acknowledged this paradox. Life needs illusions. Art, religion, morality, even love, they are masks that make existence bearable. Strip them all away, and what remains may be unlivable. Thus, the dark side of seeing too clearly is not only loneliness, but the danger of nihilism, the belief that nothing matters once illusions are unmasked. The double-edged gift, but Nietzsche was not a prophet of despair. He saw the danger, yes, but also the potential. To see too clearly is dangerous, but it can also be liberating. The difference lies in whether one succumbs to the void or dances above it. Nietzsche urged us to become creators, not merely unmaskers, but mask makers. Not just those who expose illusions, but those who craft new ones consciously, artistically, courageously. For if all life is masks, the tragedy is not that they exist. The tragedy is when we are trapped by them unconsciously. The triumph is to wear them knowingly, as art. Modern loneliness of clarity today, the curse of clarity feels sharper than ever. Scroll through social media, and the illusions are obvious: curated happiness, manufactured outrage, vulnerability engineered for sympathy. To see this clearly is to feel alienated from the endless theater of performance. At workplaces, see through the false camaraderie, the "we're a family" rhetoric, the empty motivational slogans, and the office becomes a theater of power plays, impossible to unsee. Even in private life, the awareness lingers, noticing the subtle power dynamics in friendships, the hidden resentments in families, the veiled bargaining in love. The more you notice, the harder it is to return to comfort. Nietzsche's warning and challenge. Nietzsche warned, if you take the path of clarity, expect loneliness. Expect suspicion. Expect to live on the margins. To see too much is to place yourself outside the shared dream of society. But he also issued a challenge: what will you do with this clarity? Will you collapse into cynicism, bitterness, despair? Or will you rise into creation, courage, authenticity? The dark side of seeing too clearly is real, but it is not the end. It is a threshold. Imagine standing in a crowded theater. The audience laughs, cries, claps. The actors perform their roles with conviction. Then imagine stepping backstage, seeing the costumes, the props, the makeup, the whispered cues. The illusion is gone. You cannot return to innocence. This is what it means to see too clearly. The play continues, but you can never watch it the same way again. Nietzsche invites us into this backstage. He warns us of the loneliness it brings. But he also suggests, perhaps the highest form of life is not to reject the play, but to become a playwright yourself, to create, to perform knowingly, to embrace illusion without being deceived by it. To read anyone instantly is powerful. But it comes with a price. The clearer you see, the more you stand apart. The darker the truth, the brighter your responsibility to bear it. That is the paradox. That is the curse. That is the gift. Power does not always announce itself with weapons, crowns, or armies. More often, it whispers. It shapes stories. It molds perception. Nietzsche understood this with unnerving clarity. He saw that to control how people see the world is to control people themselves. And the most effective way to control perception is not through violence, but through narratives, illusions, and masks crafted on a collective scale. If every individual wears a mask, then entire societies wear theaters, grand illusions that keep the machinery of power hidden behind velvet curtains. The invention of morality as control. Nietzsche's most radical claim was that morality itself was not eternal, divine, or absolute. It was a human invention, crafted by the weak to restrain the strong. The powerless, resentful of their subjugation, redefined values. Strength became evil. Humility became good. Domination was condemned, submission exalted. By redefining the language of virtue, they shackled their rulers not with chains, but with guilt. It was, Nietzsche argued, the greatest act of psychological manipulation in history, power inverted, not through force, but through morality. To read people instantly, therefore, is not only to see individual masks, but to recognize when entire moral systems are themselves masks, designed not for truth, but for control. Religion as the theater of illusion. Nowhere did Nietzsche see this manipulation more vividly than in religion. For centuries, churches told the poor that their suffering was noble, that their humility would be rewarded in heaven. This belief pacified resentment. It redirected anger from rulers to fate, from injustice to sin. Nietzsche called Christianity the slave morality, not as an insult, but as a psychological diagnosis. By redefining weakness as virtue, religion turned poverty into holiness, obedience into sanctity, and suffering into proof of divine favor. What greater mask could power invent? To teach the oppressed to embrace their oppression. To teach the powerless to celebrate their chains. This was not mere belief. It was perception sculpted, entire worlds of meaning reshaped by narrative. Power in propaganda history repeated the same strategy in secular forms. When empires rose, they called conquest civilization. When nations went to war, they called slaughter honor. When rulers taxed heavily, they called it duty. The words changed, but the mechanism was constant: control perception, and you control obedience. Modern history offers chilling reminders. Totalitarian regimes of the 20th century did not only command armies, they commanded narratives. Propaganda films showed smiling workers, loyal citizens, glorious leaders. Posters proclaimed slogans that turned obedience into patriotism, sacrifice into destiny. People did not merely obey out of fear, they obeyed because perception itself had been molded. They believed the mask. The psychology of advertising in today's world, propaganda has not disappeared. It has merely changed clothes. Advertising, in many ways, is the propaganda of the marketplace. Products are rarely sold for their function. They are sold as masks. The perfume is not a scent, it is seduction. The car is not transportation, it is status. The phone is not a device, it is identity. Corporations learned the same lesson Nietzsche saw centuries earlier: people are not guided by truth, but by perception. Create the right illusion, and people will buy, obey, follow, willingly. The herd instinct underlying all of this is what Nietzsche called the herd instinct. Humans, like animals, fear standing apart. The herd offers safety, identity, belonging. To question the narrative of the herd, the morality, the religion, the propaganda, is to risk exile. Thus, most people do not see illusions as illusions. They see them as reality. They adopt the herd's perception because to resist it is too lonely, too dangerous. Power knows this. Leaders, institutions, media, they do not need to persuade every individual. They only need to shape the herd. Once the herd moves, individuals follow. Modern manipulations today, perception is not only shaped by governments or religions, but by algorithms. Social media platforms decide what we see, what we believe is trending, what narratives rise and fall. Information is not neutral, it is curated, filtered, optimized for profit, for influence, for power. The result is not simply ignorance, but division. Different groups live in different realities, shaped by different illusions. One herd sees one mask, another herd sees another. The conflict is not just over truth, but over whose perception dominates. Nietzsche would not be surprised. He would say, truth has always been a mask. The only change is that the theater has gone digital. Reading people in a world of manufactured illusions. So, how do we read individuals when perception itself is manipulated? Nietzsche would suggest, do not only ask what mask does this person wear. Ask also, who gave them that mask? A citizen parrots a political slogan, but whose interest shaped it? A consumer obsesses over a brand, but whose narrative designed it? A believer preaches virtue, but what institution benefits from that virtue? Reading people instantly in the modern world means seeing not just the personal mask, but the system of masks surrounding them. The cost of seeing the manipulation, and again, clarity comes with a price. To see through propaganda is to feel alienated from those who still believe it. To see through advertising is to feel estranged from a consumer culture where others find joy. To see through herd morality is to stand apart from the comfort of belonging. It is not easy to live without illusions when everyone else embraces them. The one who sees manipulation clearly is condemned to loneliness unless they can create new meaning for themselves. Nietzsche's challenge, become a mask maker. Nietzsche's philosophy does not end with despair. He knew illusions are necessary, but he urged us to seize them consciously. If the herd accepts masks given to them, the higher individual creates their own. To live authentically is not to escape perception's manipulation entirely, that is impossible. It is to refuse passive obedience, to design one's own narrative, to choose one's own mask. The task is not to destroy illusions, but to become their author. The world is a hall of mirrors. Institutions craft reflections. Leaders polish masks. Narratives weave webs around perception. Most people wander through this hall believing the mirrors are reality. Nietzsche invites us to smash a few, to see the scaffolding behind them. But he warns, once you see it, you cannot go back. To read anyone instantly, then, is not just to read the person in front of you. It is to read the system behind them, the morality that shapes their virtue, the propaganda that frames their loyalty, the advertisements that fuel their desires, the herd that secures their obedience. Power manipulates perception. Always has, always will. The question is not whether you live among illusions, but whether you choose them, or they are chosen for you. Turning Nietzsche's truths into tools knowledge without application is a burden. To see through masks, to understand the will to power, to recognize illusions, it all becomes meaningless if it cannot be lived. Nietzsche was no abstract academic locked in ivory towers. His psychology was raw, alive, meant to be tested in the blood and dust of everyday life. He offered not commandments, but tools. Tools to read people, to navigate power, to survive in a world of appearances. So how do we use these truths? Not as tricks to manipulate. Not as shallow tactics. But as a way of seeing. Reading the room, power in conversation. Imagine a meeting. The table is crowded with voices. At first, it seems everyone is equal, exchanging ideas. But Nietzsche would tell you equality is illusion. Watch carefully. Notice who interrupts and who defers. That is power. Notice who commands attention without speaking. That is influence. Notice who flatters, who jokes, who stays silent. These are strategies, masks of obedience, tools of survival, bids for dominance. To read anyone in this moment is to stop listening only to words. Words are the theater. Power is in the choreography. Nietzsche's tool here is simple: ask not what was said, but what position was gained or lost. Every sentence is a move on a chessboard. The intimacy of power now shift to a more personal scene, two lovers at a cafe. The conversation seems tender, affectionate. But Nietzsche would ask, who is steering? Who seeks reassurance? Who frames the future? Love is not free of power. A gentle touch can soothe, but it can also bind. A declaration of devotion can comfort, but it can also control. Even silence can dominate, forcing the other to fill the gap. To apply Nietzsche here is not to poison intimacy with paranoia. It is to notice dynamics. When one partner sacrifices too often, resentment brews. When one partner dominates too often, dependence forms. Reading these undercurrents helps us see not just the mask of romance, but the will to power beneath it. Detecting contradictions. One of Nietzsche's sharpest tools is contradiction. In practice, this means paying attention when actions undermine words. The colleague who praises teamwork but hoards information. The friend who preaches honesty but gossips relentlessly. The leader who promises humility but demands worship. Contradictions are not accidents. They are cracks in the mask. Nietzsche would advise, trust them more than speeches. Resentment in disguise. Resentment is perhaps Nietzsche's most reliable compass. It seeps through tone, humor, silence. A joke that cuts too deep. A compliment delivered with bitterness. A conversation that circles endlessly around past slights. Resentment is power denied, seeking expression. Spot it, and you glimpse the truth behind behavior. The co-worker who sabotages projects. The friend who withdraws affection. The stranger who lashes out. Applying Nietzsche here means not being blindsided. If you sense resentment, you can predict behavior, sabotage, criticism, withdrawal. The role of self-observation. But Nietzsche's tools are double-edged. If you apply them only to others, you become cynical. To use them properly, you must apply them inward first. Ask yourself, what mask am I wearing now? What contradiction leaks through my words? What resentment shapes my moral convictions? What power am I seeking in this conversation? The uncomfortable truth is that Nietzsche's insights are universal. They apply to us as much as to anyone else. The more we study ourselves, the more accurately we can read others. Practical example, the job interview. Picture a job interview. The candidate says they are passionate about the company's mission. Nietzsche would smirk. Passion? Or the will to secure a paycheck, a title, a place in the hierarchy? The interview, too, wears a mask. They ask questions about teamwork and values, but what they seek is power, control over the dynamic, the chance to test the candidate's submission. Seen through Nietzsche's lens, the interview is not about truth. It is a performance of masks, a negotiation of power. Reading it clearly means recognizing when flattery is strategy, when values are alibis, when hesitation is fear of exposure. Practical example, the political speech. Now picture a politician at a podium. The words are about freedom, justice, unity. Nietzsche would whisper, what do they seek? Votes? Power? Immortality in history books? The applause of the crowd masks envy, admiration, resentment. Some clap sincerely, some clap to hide their doubt, some clap to join the herd. To apply Nietzsche here is to hear what is not said. Every promise conceals a self-serving motive. Every declaration of unity conceals division. The real message is not in the words, but in the power they seek to secure. Practical example, the friendship test. Even friendship, Nietzsche argued, is not free of struggle. Friends often disguise rivalry as loyalty. A friend may listen, but is it to support, or to collect secrets? A friend may encourage, but is it to elevate, or to subtly compete? Nietzsche does not suggest we abandon friendship. He suggests we read it more clearly. Apply his tool here. Notice when affection is tinged with envy, when advice is laced with superiority, when loyalty is bound by obligation. Then, choose your friendships with eyes open, not blind trust. The balance between clarity and paranoia. But here lies the danger. If you apply Nietzsche's tools recklessly, every interaction looks like manipulation, every smile like strategy. The world becomes unbearable, a constant theater of masks. Nietzsche would not want this. His challenge was not to abandon trust, but to sharpen perception. To use these tools as lenses, not as prisons. Yes, people wear masks. Yes, power drives action. Yes, resentment leaks through morality. But within this reality, there is also creation, art, possibility. The task is to see clearly without collapsing into despair. Imagine walking into a crowded room once again. The noise of conversation, the gestures, the laughter. Most people see only words and smiles. Nietzsche's tools allow you to see deeper, the interruptions that reveal hierarchy, the jokes that reveal resentment, the silences that reveal fear, the contradictions that reveal truth. To read people instantly is not magic. It is the art of attention. It is noticing power, resentment, appearance, contradiction. It is practicing on yourself as much as on others. And when you master these tools, the world does not necessarily become kinder, but it does become clearer. In Nietzsche's vision, clarity is not comfort. It is responsibility. Responsibility to see, to interpret, and to live with awareness in a world of masks. The final reflection, living with clear eyes. There is a point on every path of discovery where the journey no longer feels like progress, but like weight. You have learned to see through masks. You have watched the will to power at work in strangers, friends, lovers, and yourself. You have studied the illusions of morality, the machinery of perception, the strategies of resentment and admiration. And now, you stand at the threshold Nietzsche warned about, clarity without illusion. The weight of seeing the world you once inhabited, the one where words meant what they said, where virtue was pure, where kindness was free of self-interest, is gone. In its place is a theater you cannot unsee. A network of motives. A tangle of power struggles. A web of illusion spun not only by individuals, but by entire cultures. At first, this feels like loss. The warmth of naivety is gone. You are an outsider to the dream in which most people still live. Nietzsche called this the burden of truth. The two paths. Once you reach this point, there are only two paths. The first is bitterness. You become a cynic. Every kindness is manipulation. Every virtue is hypocrisy. Every smile is a mask. This path is tempting, it feels honest, even righteous, but it is another kind of blindness. The second path is creation. You accept that the world runs on masks, but you refuse to be a passive participant. You choose your mask. You shape your own values. You create illusions consciously, as an artist paints a canvas, knowing it is art and not reality. Nietzsche's highest ideal, the Übermensch, is not the one who destroys illusions, but the one who forges their own. The courage to see and stay. Clarity takes courage. Not just the courage to see, but the courage to remain among those who do not. To navigate offices, friendships, families, knowing the subtext they deny. To speak in ways they can hear, without surrendering your perception. This is where Nietzsche's insights stop being philosophical speculation and become practical survival. The mask wearers need their illusions. The herd needs its comfort. You can live among them, but you must never forget what you have seen. Why illusions still matter? It may seem paradoxical. Why value illusions once you know they are illusions? Because illusions are part of the human condition. They give beauty to life, purpose to action, hope to suffering. To strip them away completely would be to strip away art, love, faith, and even laughter. The task is not to destroy illusions indiscriminately, but to choose which ones you will keep, and which ones you will reject. A love built on chosen illusions can still be beautiful. A friendship that acknowledges rivalry can still be loyal. A morality that admits its origins can still inspire. The difference is awareness. Returning to the world, imagine you are back in the crowded cafe. You see the masks. You see the contradictions. You hear the resentment hidden in a joke, the control hidden in affection. And yet, you choose to stay. You drink your coffee. You listen to the music of conversation. You let the performance continue, not because you are fooled, but because you know it is part of the dance. This is not resignation. It is mastery. The mirror turned inward, but the hardest part remains. Nietzsche would insist that before you read others, you must read yourself. You have your own masks, your own will to power, your own contradictions. To live with clear eyes is to notice them without flinching. To admit when your kindness hides control, when your humility hides pride, when your morality hides resentment. The more honest you are with yourself, the sharper your reading of others becomes. And the more compassion you can feel, not the naive compassion of illusion, but the hard-earned compassion of understanding. What it means to live with clear eyes. To live with clear eyes is not to be all-knowing. It is not to see every motive instantly, not to be immune to deception. It is simply to remember that reality is layered, that motives are mixed, that appearances are crafted. It is to resist being swept blindly into the herd's narratives. It is to remain aware, even when it would be easier not to be. It is to choose your illusions, and to live by them as art, not as dogma. Nietzsche's final gift. Nietzsche's philosophy is often called dangerous. And it is. It can shatter innocence, unravel belief, isolate the one who sees too much. But it is also liberating. It frees you from manipulation. It frees you from unconscious obedience. It frees you from living inside someone else's story. And it gives you the rarest of powers, the ability to see people, and yourself, as you truly are. In the end, Nietzsche's 18 psychological truths are not a manual for winning arguments, outsmarting rivals, or dominating conversations. They are an invitation to step backstage in the theater of life. What you find there is not always pretty, masks upon masks, motives upon motives, power in every gesture. But if you can see it and still choose to live fully, to dance in the play while knowing it is a play, then you have achieved something rare. You have learned to live with clear eyes. And that, Nietzsche would say, is the beginning of true freedom. Contradictions reveal more than consistency. We are trained to admire consistency. The friend who always shows up on time. The leader who speaks with steady conviction. The colleague who never changes their stance. But Nietzsche would tell you, consistency is a mask. The human being is not consistent. The human being is conflict, contradiction, turbulence beneath a thin layer of calm. It is not in what people repeat faithfully that their truth appears. It is in the cracks, the slips, the contradictions they cannot disguise. The theater of consistency. Society rewards consistency. A politician who changes their mind is branded a hypocrite. A partner who wavers is called unreliable. A friend who shifts loyalties is seen as weak. So, people learn to construct the mask of consistency. They rehearse their stories. They smooth over doubts. They edit their memories until the past aligns with the present. But Nietzsche saw this as artifice. Life itself is not static. A truly honest person would shift as they grow, contradict themselves as they encounter new truths. It is the insistence on seamless consistency that should make us suspicious. The power of contradiction. Consider history. The preacher who thunders against temptation but is later discovered in scandal. The king who preaches humility but demands endless flattery. The reformer who condemns corruption yet secretly builds their own empire. In each case, the mask of consistency was convincing. It fooled the masses. But the contradiction revealed the truth. Nietzsche believed this is the key to reading people. Do not be hypnotized by their polished story. Wait for the contradiction. That is where reality emerges. Psychology confirms it. Modern psychology agrees. Research into lie detection shows that liars struggle not with big stories, but with small details. They maintain the broad narrative but contradict themselves in gestures, timelines, tone. Their faces betray micro-expressions that clash with their words. The contradiction is not noise, it is signal. It reveals the tension between mask and motive. Everyday examples. You see this everywhere. The friend who says, "I don't care what people think," yet constantly checks their phone for likes. The colleague who insists they just want the team to succeed, but becomes cold when others are praised. The partner who claims, "I trust you completely," yet snoops through messages at night. The contradiction reveals more than the consistency ever could. How to apply it? Nietzsche's tool here is simple but profound. Pay attention to contradictions. Listen for statements that do not match tone. Watch for actions that undermine words. Notice when values vanish under pressure. Do not dismiss contradictions as accidents. They are glimpses of truth breaking through the mask. Closing reflection. Consistency is performance. Contradiction is confession. Nietzsche would argue that to read people instantly is to shift your focus, not to the polished story they present, but to the moments they falter. The pauses. The slips. The contradictions. Because in those moments, the mask slips, and the face behind it is revealed. Resentment is a stronger force than love. Love is celebrated as the greatest of human emotions. It fills poems, songs, and sacred texts. We are told it conquers all, that it is the force binding families, societies, even civilizations. But Nietzsche, ever the unflinching psychologist, believed otherwise. He argued that love, while powerful, is fragile. It can fade, weaken, even vanish. Resentment, however, ressentiment, as he called it, is durable. It grows in silence, festers in shadows, and shapes human behavior more profoundly than any affection. The anatomy of resentment. Love demands reciprocity. It thrives when returned, but withers when denied. Resentment, by contrast, requires no reciprocity. It feeds itself endlessly. The worker overlooked for promotion does not simply forget. Their resentment builds in whispers, in jokes, in quiet sabotage. The rejected lover does not simply move on. Their resentment transforms into bitterness, accusations, revenge. The powerless class does not simply accept inequality. Their resentment becomes morality, turning weakness into a weapon against the strong. Resentment, Nietzsche believed, outlives love because it does not seek harmony. It seeks rebalancing. It is a hidden will to power, clawing for redress. Historical echoes. History offers endless examples. The French Revolution did not begin with love of liberty alone. It began with resentment, peasants watching aristocrats feast while they starved. That resentment toppled a monarchy. Religious movements, too, often carry resentment at their core. The meek, denied earthly power, redefined themselves as morally superior. Their resentment reshaped entire civilizations. Even art bears this mark. Some of history's most influential works were fueled not by joy but by wounds, resentment against critics, rivals, unfaithful patrons. Love may inspire harmony, but resentment drives transformation. The psychology of resentment. Modern psychology confirms Nietzsche's intuition. Studies show that negative emotions like resentment are stickier than positive ones. We remember slights longer than compliments. We dwell on insults more than praise. A single betrayal can overshadow years of devotion. Why? Because resentment is protective. It warns us, never forget who hurt you. Never let them do it again. Love invites vulnerability, resentment guards against it. This survival function makes resentment a potent, enduring force. Reading people through resentment. If Nietzsche is right, then to read people instantly, you must listen for resentment. It rarely announces itself directly. It leaks through, the colleague's sarcastic remark that lands a little too sharply. The friend's laughter that masks envy. The partner's silence that punishes without words. Resentment is often disguised as morality. It's not fair can mean, I feel powerless. They shouldn't act that way can mean, I wish I could. Nietzsche urged us to read beneath these statements, to see resentment not as justice, but as envy in disguise. Everyday examples. A sibling praises your success, but their tone chills. A co-worker congratulates you, but their smile strains. A friend supports you, but always shifts the story back to their own struggles. These are not small slips. They are signals. Resentment is speaking, quietly but unmistakably. The double-edged. Nietzsche was not sentimental about resentment, but neither did he dismiss it. He knew it fuels creativity, revolution, even justice. Resentment gives the powerless a voice. It topples kings and rewrites values. But it also corrodes. Left unchecked, it poisons relationships, corrodes self-respect, and traps people in cycles of bitterness. Love may fade, but resentment calcifies. Love is bright, but fragile. Resentment is dark, but enduring. Nietzsche's unsettling truth is that if you want to read someone, do not look first for whom they love, but for whom they resent. Because resentment, more than love, reveals where their energy flows, where their hidden battles rage, where their future actions will emerge. To know a person's resentments is to know their deepest motives. Flattery is domination in disguise. Most people believe criticism is the weapon of domination. But Nietzsche understood something more subtle. Flattery can be just as dangerous. Compliments, he argued, are rarely innocent. They are strategies. They soften resistance, lower defenses, and create invisible debts. Praise, when used skillfully, is not a gift, it is a leash. The seduction of praise. We are wired to crave approval. A kind word lights up the brain more powerfully than money. Recognition feels like nourishment. But Nietzsche warned, when someone flatters you, ask not what they said, but what they wanted in return. The subordinate flatters the boss to gain promotion. The politician flatters the crowd to secure votes. The suitor flatters the beloved to bind them with affection. Each smile, each compliment, each gesture of admiration is not only an expression of feeling, it is a move in the game of power. Historical masks of flattery. History is filled with flatterers who shaped the fate of empires. In the courts of kings, flattery was currency. Nobles lived or died by how well they could praise the ruler. Louis XIV, the Sun King, was surrounded by courtiers who flattered his every word. Their survival depended not on truth, but on the sweetness of their compliments. Even tyrants demanded it. Stalin did not only want obedience, he demanded flattery. Cities, mountains, even children were named after him. This was not about affection. It was about domination disguised as devotion. Nietzsche would argue, the louder the flattery, the more it masks fear. The psychology of flattery. Modern research supports Nietzsche's insight. Compliments trigger dopamine, making people more open to influence. Studies show that even when people know flattery is insincere, it still works. The praise bypasses logic and plants itself deep in the emotional brain. This is why advertisers use it constantly. You deserve this. You're worth it. These are not affirmations. They are flattery in mass production, designed to dominate wallets. Everyday examples. Think of the colleague who says, "No one can do it like you," just before asking you to take extra work. The friend who insists, "You're so generous," while angling for a favor. The partner who repeats, "You're perfect," to discourage you from noticing their flaws. Flattery disarms. It makes resistance feel ungrateful, refusal feel cruel. That is why Nietzsche insisted, praise can dominate more effectively than criticism. How to read flattery. Nietzsche's tool here is ruthless but simple. Whenever you receive flattery, pause. Ask, why this compliment, at this moment? What position does it place me in? What power might it give the other person? This does not mean distrusting all praise. But it means treating praise as signal, not as truth. Often, the real meaning of a compliment is not about you at all, it is about what the flatterer seeks. The double edge of flattery. Nietzsche did not deny that flattery can feel good, or even foster bonds. But he believed its danger lies in its hidden asymmetry. Genuine love affirms without expectation. Flattery binds with obligation. The flatterer always wants something: recognition, loyalty, submission, repayment. In this way, praise is a mask of domination. We are taught to be wary of critics, but Nietzsche would say, be more wary of admirers. The critic shows their weapon openly. The flatterer conceals theirs in honeyed words. To read people instantly, watch how they praise. The compliment that feels too smooth, too perfectly timed, too convenient, that is not love. That is strategy. And in that moment, you will see what Nietzsche saw. Flattery is not the opposite of criticism. It is its twin. Both seek power. One wounds to control. The other soothes to dominate. Admiration is tinged with secret hatred when crowds cheer a hero, when friends praise a success, when nations celebrate their champions. It seems like pure admiration. But Nietzsche would tell you, look closer. Admiration is rarely clean. Beneath it lurks something darker. The same mouths that cheer are often the ones that whisper, resent, and wait for collapse. Admiration, he argued, is almost always tinged with secret hatred. The dual nature of admiration. On the surface, admiration elevates. We look up to those who embody strength, beauty, genius, or courage. We idolize them, imitate them, even worship them. But admiration also highlights inequality. To admire someone is to recognize they stand above us. And that recognition quietly stings. It reminds us of our own limits, our own failures, our own insecurities. Thus, admiration breeds resentment. The very act of elevating someone plants the seed of envy. History's applauded, then destroyed. History offers endless examples of this paradox. Julius Caesar was admired as a brilliant general, adored by his legions, celebrated by Rome. Yet the Senate, many of whom once praised him, turned against him in resentment, plunging knives into the very man they had once honored. Marie Antoinette, adored for her beauty and charisma in her youth, became the object of venomous hatred as her privileges stood in stark contrast to the starving poor. Even artists suffer the same fate. Van Gogh, unrecognized in life, was later worshipped, but not before decades of dismissal, ridicule, and envy from peers. Admiration is rarely steady, it often mutates into hatred. The psychology of envy. Modern psychology confirms Nietzsche's suspicion. Social comparison is hardwired. When we encounter someone who excels, our admiration is mixed with envy. We want to praise them, but we also want to pull them down. This is why tall poppy syndrome exists in many cultures. The tallest flower must be cut down so the rest can stand equal. Admiration is the mask, envy is the undercurrent. Everyday examples: think of the colleague who congratulates you on a promotion, but their smile lingers just a moment too long. The friend who praises your new relationship, but quickly adds, "But be careful, it might not last." The audience that cheers a celebrity, but devours gossip about their scandals with greater enthusiasm. This is Nietzsche's point: admiration is rarely pure. The applause conceals as much resentment as it reveals praise. How to read admiration? Nietzsche's tool here is subtle. When someone admires you, listen for the undertone. Do their words contain a shadow of doubt? Do they shift the focus back to themselves? Do they praise with one breath and undermine with the next? Admiration often carries a hidden wish that you will stumble, so the admirer can feel relief in your fall. The double-edged Nietzsche was not naive. He knew admiration could inspire, but he also knew it was dangerous. Those who are admired must expect envy. Those who are envied must expect betrayal. The stronger you shine, the more shadows you cast. Closing reflection: admiration feels warm, but Nietzsche saw the chill beneath it. He believed that to be admired is to be envied, and to be envied is to be hated in secret. To read people instantly, do not take praise at face value. Ask what lies beneath. Because the same hand that claps in admiration today may sharpen the knife tomorrow. Conclusion: the final mask. There is a strange silence at the end of all searching. You have followed Nietzsche into the labyrinth of human psychology. You have seen masks torn away, illusions dismantled, motives revealed. You have studied resentment, envy, contradiction, the will to power. And now the question lingers: what do you do with this vision? The world behind the curtain. Most people live happily in front of the curtain. They take the performance at face value, the politician's promise, the lover's vow, the friend's loyalty. They live in the theater of appearances. But you have stepped backstage. You have seen the props, the rehearsed lines, the carefully painted masks. You cannot return to innocence. Once you notice the cracks, they do not disappear. Once you hear the undertones of resentment, the false notes of flattery, the subtle reach for power, you hear them everywhere. Nietzsche warned that this clarity is both gift and curse. It liberates, but it isolates. Living with clear eyes. To live with clear eyes is not to see every secret. It is not to expose every mask. It is simply to remember, people are layered. Their words and actions are rarely what they seem. Their virtues often grow from selfish roots. Their admiration often hides envy. Their morality often cloaks weakness. This is not cause for despair. It is cause for realism. The one who sees with clear eyes does not fall for cheap flattery. They are not destroyed by betrayal, because they expected it. They are not enslaved by illusions, because they recognize them as illusions. This awareness does not remove suffering. But it does prevent naivety. Choosing illusions. Nietzsche knew that illusions are necessary. Without them, life would be unbearable. Without stories, values, rituals, art, the raw truth of existence would overwhelm us. But he also knew there is a difference between being fooled by illusions and choosing them consciously. Most people inherit their illusions from the herd. They believe what everyone else believes, not because it is true, but because it is safe. They worship the masks handed down by religion, politics, culture. The higher individual, Nietzsche argued, does something different. They choose. They create. They decide which illusions to live by, and they wear them knowingly, as an artist wears a costume. This is the final lesson: do not discard illusions entirely. But never let them rule you unconsciously. The responsibility of seeing knowledge is weight. The more you see, the more responsibility you bear. To read others instantly is not to mock them, nor to manipulate them. It is to understand them. It is to see their masks and resentments without forgetting your own. Because Nietzsche's psychology is not only about others. It is about us. We, too, wear masks. We, too, hide envy behind smiles, power behind kindness, selfishness behind virtue. The real responsibility of seeing others clearly is to confront ourselves just as clearly. The final mask in the end, Nietzsche would remind us of a paradox: even those who see through masks must wear one. The philosopher wears the mask of wisdom. The rebel wears the mask of defiance. Even Nietzsche himself, the unmasker of mankind, wore the mask of prophet, of solitary thinker, of philosopher with a hammer. The point is not to live mask-free. That is impossible. The point is to wear masks consciously, without self-deception. To choose your mask rather than inherit it blindly. To step onto the stage of life aware of the theater you are in. A final reflection: so where does this leave us? You walk through the world differently now. You notice the cracks in consistency. You recognize resentment disguised as morality. You hear flattery for what it is, domination in disguise. You accept that admiration often hides envy, that every virtue has selfish roots. But instead of despair, you carry this awareness with calm. You no longer demand purity from others, or from yourself. You accept the complexity of motives. You live not as a cynic, but as a realist, crafting meaning consciously, choosing illusions deliberately. Perhaps this is Nietzsche's final challenge: to live with eyes open, in a world where most keep theirs closed. To see masks, and still dance with them. To face resentment, and still create. To bear clarity, and still love. Closing words: in the end, Nietzsche's truths are not tricks to outwit others. They are reminders of what it means to be human, flawed, masked, driven by power, shaped by resentment, clinging to illusions. To read anyone instantly is not to know their every thought. It is to notice the forces at work beneath the surface. And in doing so, to live not in blindness, but in awareness. You cannot escape masks. But you can master them. You cannot erase illusions. But you can choose them. You cannot silence the will to power. But you can recognize it, in yourself and in others. This is what it means to live with clear eyes. This is Nietzsche's gift. And this is the final mask, the one you choose to wear, knowingly, in the theater of life.